Hey, what's up, YouTube? We're back for a Tier 10 Super Helldive primary tier list for the bot front. We're going to be going through the new weapons and the existing weapons and how they fare in the new difficulty. Please make sure that you understand that this is my personal opinion, and I'm trying to line them up from like the most effective in the most amount of situations, and then how they go down the list from there. If they have some downsides, they might still be an S tier. If they have more downsides, especially more glaring ones, they'll start dropping down. And then obviously the ones that need more work will be in C and needs a buff tier. All right. All right. So starting off with Cookout, I've actually been pretty impressed by it, more so than I thought. I thought, oh, okay, it's just going to be another incendiary breaker on the bot front. Not very useful. Enemies just have so much HP that the burn damage doesn't really apply too much to the actual like outcome of the fight. But I've actually been pretty impressed with it. It makes me want to put it in like A-, B+ kind of territory. I do find it, or actually closer to A, I do find it fairly proficient at dealing with like Devastators if you don't really want to aim too much. It does have a sizable amount of stagger per pellet, and the fire damage over a longer engagement, which will typically happen, does have some amount of an effect here. Definitely try to aim for a weak point and just hope that a pellet or two will land on the face and you'll get that weak point kill. But other than that, I think it's actually fairly good for someone who doesn't really want to think too hard about like hitting weak points on like Devastators at a distance. This can do decent amount of work. And from a team play perspective, if you just light everything on fire, that means every enemy that eventually will come to you is going to be, a decent amount lower HP over the course of that distance traveled. So it's fairly good. Also, fire is extremely good versus the tier 1 bots. So keep that in mind. But it's not going to be any higher than like A-, just because it has light pen, and you kind of need medium pen to fit into the higher band of A and S. So keep that in mind. Cinderbreaker will just be a middle B for a similar reason to the Cookout, but it lacks the ability to stagger, which does make a sizable difference. And also it's a little bit, the pellet spread is wider, so less of an opportunity to hit weak points. The Breaker is just a worse off Cinderbreaker. Very similar reasons to the Incendiary Breaker not being as proficient. You're not really hitting weak points with it. You don't have much ammo. It doesn't have any stagger. So it's really only good against tier 1 bots and the Zerkers that run at you. But I'll be honest, I'd rather have the Cookout or the Incendiary Breaker in those situations. Plasma Punisher is still fairly high on the list, even though it's not as good against the new reinforced Striders, the Rocket Striders. They take a lot of shots, I've been finding sometimes, to get that kill. And it doesn't seem like you can shoot the rockets on the side of the Rocket Strider to get it to blow up. I've been trying my best to get like the explosive damage to blow them up, but it seems like you actually need impact damage to get the rockets on the side to like actually trigger and kill the Rocket Strider. So because of that, explosive weapons kind of suffer more so against the reinforced Strider, and I don't know if that's intended or not. So we'll see going forward if that's maybe something that will get better, because like if all of a sudden the explosive damage was able to trigger the rockets on the side to instantly kill the Rocket Strider, I think it would change the dynamic quite a bit, and I'd want to put like the Plasma Punisher higher. But in the current context, it just can't. Spray and Pray probably deserves to be like a C-, needs a buff like badly territory. There's just very little point for it to exist in the current form because I'd rather use other shotgun options. It's better than the Incendiary Breaker or the normal Breaker because it has more ammo, but it has worse handling. It's a shotgun. It's less accurate. You're not really doing all that much damage per shot also because you're doing less damage than the Incendiary Breaker and the Breaker. So it's just like, yeah, it's got more damage or more like total damage because of the ammo reserves, but it's like damage per second is quite low in comparison. So got to keep that in mind. Slugger, I do think is a solid contender for like the bot front. Medium pen, similar to the Plasma Punisher. It doesn't have the explosive damage of the Plasma Punisher, but it has the single slug that can one-tap Devastators. So if you find yourself wanting that like closer range, precision-based weapon, the Slugger's for you. It also got recently its stagger back, and it easily fits into the A tier because of that. I do like bringing it, but it requires a lot of aim skill in order to make it proficient and good at a good TTK value. If you are someone that is struggling to hit weak points on Devastators especially, every shot you miss or every shot you just only hit a body shot really hurts the weapon's overall TTK. So for that reason, it can't be any higher, and I don't think it deserves to be any lower than that just because it does have a lot of stagger and does have medium pen. The Punisher is a solid option from the shotgun front. Similar to the Cookout, doesn't require a whole lot of accuracy as long as you're kind of aiming in the direction of the weak point. There's a good chance that within a couple shots, 2 or 3, that a weak point will be hit. And also while you're aiming for that weak point, at least a pellet or two will hit a light pen area on the Devastator, being able to at least stagger it quite a bit. Unfortunately, it doesn't have any potential in killing like the higher tier enemies, like that require medium pen or explosive damage, but it's still fairly good for like that like Berserker spam or Devastator spam or like tier 1 bots. Also fairly good against like Hulks if you can get behind them. Purifier is a somewhat hard one to place because I know a lot of people will just completely like, you know, turn the video off immediately once I put it in A-, but I think a lot of people just don't, they want to use the Purifier in the same context they use every other weapon. The Purifier you have to use differently because of the nature of the charge, right? You have to play a little bit slower, a little bit more methodical, behind cover, peeking out when it's fully charged, stuff like that. But from a basis of like what it does a lot of things very good. It has a crap load of stagger, the same as the Plasma Punisher. It has medium pen, same as Plasma Punisher. It has a very good ammo economy, similar to the Scorcher, but it does more damage per shot, and it's medium pen, so you get more your damage goes further against more targets, and it has more range than the Plasma Punisher. Although it has the decrease in fire rate, but if you get used to it, it's somewhat similar to the Arc Thor, where the first shot takes the most amount of time, but subsequent shots afterwards are a little bit less time. It's hard to explain, but you'll kind of get what I mean if you use it. Highly recommend giving the Purifier a try and just play a little bit slower, more methodical. It will bully Devastators quite a bit. And it's fairly good against getting a flank on a tank. Gunships also, just similar to the Scorcher, just aim for the middle cockpit. It will kill them. And it is fairly good against the new Rocket Strider. It is better than the Plasma Punisher. I think that's because the Purifier has a little bit more impact damage, if I remember correctly. Less explosive damage, but more impact damage, which makes it more proficient at taking out the leg of a new Rocket Strider. So give that a try. Blitzer is, I think, another C tier weapon. It's cool that it has unlimited ammo. It has a ton of stagger, but there's too many enemies that are just going to bully you because you have to be within 20 meters to utilize it. And also, heavy Devastators just laugh at you because the majority of the shock will just hit the shield and you'll do null damage because of it. And for that reason, like, I think it's like, it either needs to be able to go through the shield of a heavy Devastator or needs to be like redesigned for the bot front, or they just say, hey, it's just a bug weapon, right? Maybe that's just how it's going to be for this weapon. Dominator, still your S tier option for like your chunkier damage while being medium pen. Very good versus Devastators. You can easily stagger lock them, aiming at the front eye or aiming at one of their legs, double tap to their leg. It'll instantly kill a Devastator. Very strong weapon, flanking a tank. It can kill a Radiator fairly fast. It's a good option. It's not the best versus gunships because they tend to move so much and the bullet velocity of the Dominator is quite slow. But if you do hit your shots, you can kill a gunship with it. It's just not a super strong option for that. Now, going into one that previously was an S tier because it's just a good all-arounder, it has dropped in my brain a little bit. I've been trying, especially today, to use the Scorcher quite a bit, and I just found myself not enjoying using the Scorcher as much as I previously did now that the new Rocket Strider is a thing. The Rocket Scout Strider is very strong against the Scorcher, unfortunately, because the explosive damage doesn't seem to be killing the pilot because he's fully enclosed in that armor. So you have to spend well over half your magazine, sometimes even more, to kill a Scout Strider, the Rocket Scout Strider, like the reinforced one. And it just doesn't make for good ammo economy because you only have 7 mags. So when you're using so much of your ammo to take out one enemy, it's not great. So it makes me want to, and I've been debating this with chat, on whether or not I continue to have the Scorcher in S tier or I move it down to A tier. Not sure. We're going to see how it plays out over the course of the tier list. I haven't fully decided, and I want to hear what you guys think down in the chat. Like, is this something you would still put in S tier, or is it something that, you know, the new enemy has really affected your placement on it? Especially now that gunships are less of an issue. I feel like having the primary that's the best primary at killing gunships isn't much, when I think the new Rocket Striders are a huge like problem at the moment for most teams, because those rockets can one-shot you, they stagger you, they send you flying, and if you can't kill them proficiently, it's pretty hard to complete those tier 10 sometimes. They just take so many of your lives away. I'm going to put the Torture as our first weapon in needs a buff. Just in general, flamethrowers have never been good, but this one even suffers more because it has less damage. I've been saying more for the bug front, but it still applies to the bot front. I would love to see flamethrowers still get a little bit more range, and also I think the flame should have some amount of pushback to it. If an enemy is inside that plume of fire going towards them, they should be like at least staggered backwards a little bit. I don't like the fact that I've been using it, like you try to use the torture and enemies just walk right towards you through all of that to get to you. It's not very fun in that regard, right? The torture might do like decent damage, but on the bot front, you just don't have enough range, or it just needs to do more with some CC on top of that. All right, Eruptor is still your solid A tier pick for bots. It's really good when paired with things like the heavy machine gun or railgun or AMR or laser cannon as the weapon that you use to snipe fabricators or to deal with like distant targets when you don't have your support weapon. Especially if you use it with the animation cancel to be able to cycle rounds faster with opening this stratagem window between shots, you can get a really good fire rate and kill a lot of things with AoE damage, especially if they're coming in through the dropship method. You can just fire at the bottom of the dropship and get quite a few kills on enemies you wouldn't think it would be good against because you're firing from underneath and hitting decently exposed weak spots. Expo, I'm going to put the exploding crossbow in B+. I do prefer using the Eruptor over the crossbow. I think the crossbow would be the better overall option if they ever fix the animation cancel. The Eruptor would probably drop to maybe a B tier, maybe B+, just below the crossbow, if they fix the animation cancel. But I'm hoping that if they ever fix that, they would increase the bolt speed of the Eruptor. The crossbow did recently turn to a one-handed weapon, which is cool for Ballistic Shield. But if you've already watched the Stratagem tier list video that we'll be posting just before this one comes out, you'll know that the Ballistic Shield is in not a great spot. It dies way too fast to the new rocket Scout Strider. Way too fast. Like it seemed like 1 or 2 rockets and the shield's dead and you're just waiting on a cooldown. So I feel like there's no more cope. The Ballistic Shield is just not in a good spot. It needs to either be increased in durability, so I want to use it more often, or anything like that. Like it needs to be able to survive. It does. Diligence, the standard Diligence, I think is a very strong light pen primary to go for. It does require 2 taps to the eye of a Devastator though, and it has light pen. So if you're just unlocking the weapon, I think it's fairly good to use on those longer range kills, but I find myself usually gravitating towards like the Tenderizer or the Adjudicator. And you might be like, why would you use those? I feel like you can use those weapons in single shot, very similar to Diligence. Maybe not as much zoom, but you can use them in very similar circumstances. And then the older brother, the Diligence Counter Sniper, is a fantastic weapon on the bot front. Highly recommend giving it a try if you haven't already. It does require a good amount of accuracy, less so than the Slugger because you have better zoom, but it's a fantastic weapon to try and snipe Devastators similar to the AMR. It requires more accuracy to be effective, but it's quite good. I highly recommend giving it a try. It's a fun weapon. Yeah, just give it a try. Highly recommend. Sickle is going to be up there in A tier. It might be a bit of a weird spot just because it has light pen, but it's a very fun weapon to use if you have a high degree of accuracy. It's one of those ones that it requires a high degree of accuracy. You need to be able to snipe those points on Devastators. It's probably like a solid A tier. I don't think it deserves to be A+, just because it has only light pen, so there's going to be quite a few enemies that you can't really deal with. But even the new Rocket Striders, if you shoot the tips of the rockets with the sickle or any light pen weapon of that nature, you can kill them relatively fast, right? Because when the rocket explodes, it will kill the Strider, which is pretty cool. Scythe is going to be a like B tier weapon. I like it, but only in incredibly close range situations. It really struggles at those like medium to long distance just because it doesn't have a good scope. The sickle, you can use at relatively long distance because it has a fantastic scope and good zoom. Scythe doesn't have that. It has a red dot and no magnification. So it's difficult to make use of it at anything at like, like at your average engagement distance, which I would argue a lot of the times you're fighting something, it's usually right at the 30 to 50 meters, and the Scythe is very difficult to hit those very precise shots. So I'm still hoping that Arrowhead gives us a better scope on it in the future. Liberate Penetrator is a hard one because somewhat it deserves all the way down and needs a buff because it is one of the few weapons that basically hasn't been changed since the launch of the game, other than giving it full auto. But it just gets completely overshadowed by its bigger brother, the Adjudicator. It might deserve to be at least a little higher just because it's medium pen, but I feel like it really does deserve to be this low because I don't want to recommend it to people. I highly recommend going for the Adjudicator or another medium pen option just because per bullet damage is quite low. So you can't really utilize the medium pen difference as much as you would want to. I would still recommend going for weak points on Devastators and You're not really killing a tank's radiator very fast with this thing. It just does so little damage per shot. Yeah, I can't necessarily recommend the Liberator. Maybe I'm being a bit too harsh on it, putting a B-, but I feel like it's quite fair. Liberator Concussive is another one that it's either going to be in like a C tier, C+, or B-. Main reason for that is it has fairly good like CC, but it lacks a lot of damage. So you're definitely going to have to try and hit weak points while also using it for CC. Doesn't fire very fast. I feel like I'd rather just use the Pummeler because it's one-handed and it just has better stats in general than Liberator Concussive. Liberator Concussive just in general just needs more help. More damage, better stats, maybe better fire rate. Yeah, and until they do that, I can't really recommend using it either. The Adjudicator is like a B+, A- weapon. I think you could very much kind of put it in either section. It's a bit of a difficult one because it has enough ammo necessarily if you're tap firing, but if you find yourself wanting to full auto it doesn't really have enough ammo. It's nice that you can use it as kind of like a designated marksman rifle because that's actually that's what it was classified as before. It was kind of like a lighter damage but higher pen alternative to the Diligence Counter Sniper, but it still requires 2 shots, so it's kind of like more similar to the Diligence. But it is nice that if a Devastator gets really close, you can kind of just spam fire it into the leg, killing it quite quickly. Obviously, you can take out Radiators. The new Scout Striders, you can either go for the rockets or the leg. It's fairly good in that regard, but, you know, just be careful of your ammo economy. You can go through it really quickly if you're just full auto spamming it. So be careful. Tenderizer is an interesting alternative to the Adjudicator. I want to put it very similar to the Sickle, but the Sickle kind of is on another level just because it has unlimited ammo and you don't have to worry about the ammo economy, and it just has so little recoil. The Tenderizer is good because if you do burst or like small, like even single shot, you can kind of use it as like almost a better Diligence because it has that faster fire rate than the Diligence, but it lacks that like medium pen than the Adjudicator has. So the Tenderizer is another one where it's like, it's probably more of a B+, but I really enjoy using it and I would recommend trying it out versus Devastators, but it's hard for me really to like recommend using it in a lot of situations because it requires a lot of accuracy. Doesn't have the stagger of like a Slugger, so your shots will be punished if you can't hit the target effectively. So for that reason, I think I'm going to keep it in B+ for now. Normal Liberator is solid. It's there's like nothing necessarily like totally wrong with it, but there's also nothing really going for it. It's okay. You can bring it and be pretty proficient if you can hit some weak spots. It has decent ammo economy. I'd recommend like small short bursts for most enemies. And yeah, I know that they've already said that ARs in general are going to see some changes and some buffs in the near future, and I look forward to seeing what they're going to do with ARs. I've said quite a bit that, you know, if they just bumped up the damage another little bit and gave them like at least 2 to 3 more backup magazines, you know, I could see them being in a much better spot. Liberator Carbine, I'm going to put quite low in the B section. It's very similar to the normal Liberator stat-wise, but it has more recoil, making it harder for you to hit those weak points, and it has a worse scope. It's to the point where I'm almost putting it in C tier, and I think that's a pretty fair place to put it, honestly. But I think it's similar to the Liberator that like it has at least decent damage per second, so if like a Berserker is running at you, you can drop it pretty quickly. But yeah, it's really much, it's dancing between C+ and B-. And many times I would just say I'd rather bring the Liberator Penetrator because at least I have medium pen, so I don't have to worry so much about where I'm hitting a target. So yeah, we'll see. I think I'm going to keep it in B-, but it doesn't really deserve to be any higher. Defender is probably going to be like a solid B+. Still one-handed, great weapon to use. If you pair it with the Ballistic Shield, I still don't think Ballistic Shield's in a great spot, but it's one-handed for those mission objectives like carrying around the Automaton Skull after clearing a Mega Base, or just SSDs, or just like, you know, Berserkers are chasing after you, you can shoot behind them, or shoot behind yourself while running away from them. Fairly good for those situations, but the reason why I'm not going to put it any higher is because it's competing with the Pummeler. And I think the Pummeler is just a better SMG in pretty much every stretch of the imagination. It's a very good option, even though it doesn't have medium pen for bots, just because it has so much stagger. Similar to the Cookout in that regard, that, you know, even if you're missing a couple shots here and there while trying to go for weak points, you're at least going to stagger the enemy that's screwing with you. And if you flank a Hulk, as long as you like keep the trigger down, you can actually stun lock the Hulk so he can't turn around to face you, which is actually a really cool little thing and interaction that the Pummeler can do. Highly recommend checking that out if Hulks have been really, you know, annoying you. and like flanking them has been really pissing you off. You know, stun grenade to close the distance, get behind them, just slay into their radiator, and they just can't turn around, which is really interesting. The knight is in another one of those awkward positions where it still needs its ammo economy fixed. It's only getting half reserves when you get the called down resupply, like the big resupply box. Also, in general, I feel like it just doesn't have enough ammo, even when you put it in burst fire and you try to go for weak points. But I feel like that defeats the purpose of the weapon when you put it in burst fire like that, because it's supposed to be this high fire rate weapon, and you just can't utilize it because the ammo economy is just so bad. And even in burst fire, it's not kind of like the AN-94 is in some games where like the burst fire is so fast that the gun only like recoils from that initial shot. The burst comes out over a period of time, so it's not a very tight grouping. If they maybe made the grouping a little bit tighter on the burst fire, maybe I'd recommend it a little bit more. But it's slowly going down my list because they're buffing a lot of weapons alongside, and the knight has still not been fixed, and I don't know what they're doing. I don't know why they're not changing it. Why? Please, fix it. It wouldn't be pay to win. I know it's technically in a pay to win bundle, but it wouldn't be pay to win. Just fix it, please. All right, the dagger. I think the dagger is okay. And the reason why I say that is that if you have a high degree of accuracy in those like really close range situations, you can drop a devastator really quickly if you put that laser beam on the eye. Laser weapons in general are like scalpels, right? They have very low like total damage. Like they're very bad at battling the total HP pool of the enemy, but if you go for specific weak points, they're fairly good. The dagger still needs like a better fire time and maybe like a better, like more precise zoom. I'm not sure exactly what you would do to the dagger other than what I've listed, but it definitely needs some more love. And it is also teetering on the B- C+. Like it could easily be dropped down to that if you're someone who just requires more immediate damage or someone who just doesn't see the value in having technically a gun with unlimited ammo. So yeah. The verdict, I really like using it. It's probably my favorite sidearm at the moment, other than using the grenade pistol. I really enjoy it if you get good at like knowing the recoil, and I really enjoy like just crouching while shooting it. It can be very accurate. It drops berserkers fairly fast. Yeah, I really enjoy using it. It's probably one of my favorite like additions to the secondary slot, and would recommend trying it out if. And there's also a little bit of tech. So if you get really good and like want to start using it like John Wick, if you are moving forward or diving forward while you shoot it at a Devastator's eye, you can actually one-shot a Devastator's eye with it with a little bit of that forward momentum. Kind of a cool breakpoint to hit if you have that forward momentum. So would recommend trying it out. I like using it with my autocannon since I don't need the grenade pistol or anything like that. It's just kind of that weapon where like a tier 1 bot shows up. I like using this thing versus it. It a lot of time 1 taps, sometimes 2 taps, which is nice. Peacemaker is just a worse verdict in a lot of different ways. Can't necessarily recommend it because I feel like it just needs more ammo. I wish it was more silent, and just because of the lower damage profile, you're typically like 3-tapping an enemy and it doesn't already have a big magazine. So it immediately has to go up against the Redeemer, which I would argue the Redeemer is just a better choice. For those that, you know, need a little bit more damage per second and they want more of a machine pistol, the Redeemer is awesome for that, and I highly recommend it. And if you want like a more accurate weapon sometimes, swap it to single fire mid-mission and just start tap firing it if you feel like ammo is more of a concern for you. Because in many respects, I would rather use the Redeemer than the Peacemaker. The Crisper is very similar to the Torture. I just can't really see a purpose for it. Unlike the bug missions, I at least saw a purpose of like, you know, lighting the ground on fire and letting the enemies walk through it. Most likely the fire will go out by the time the enemies get to it, minus some berserkers, but I would rather just like use the ammo on the berserkers that are running at you. I can't recommend this, the Crisper at all. It's more of a bug weapon, but I think everybody kind of knew that going in, so it is what it is. The Bushwhacker is a fairly fun weapon to use on the bot missions. Like if berserkers get really close to you, you can stagger them and do a good amount of damage per shot. It's like, you know, it's the Punisher, but in your pocket. I enjoy it. It's just, I feel like there's too many situations where I would rather have more range with my secondary weapon. So that's why I favor the Redeemer, the Verdict, the Senator, and so on and so forth. The Bushwhacker just, you know, it's more of a bug weapon or like an extreme close range. So if you're someone who leans on your secondary weapon mostly for those situations, you know, I would probably kind of use it for those. So I would use it only in that like extreme close range situation, basically, is what I'm saying. Senator is a solid pick in the A tier. I'm putting all of the sidearms, basically aside from the grenade pistol, in like the solid A- because I think they're quite good. I would like to see all sidearms maybe get a little bit more proficient against bots in particular, and not require so many weak spot hits. to land, or, you know, you can attack the total health pool a little bit easier. The Senator is probably the king of just like a regular sidearm, just because it has medium pen, which can be very useful in a lot of situations. But that medium pen doesn't go very far because it doesn't have a ton of damage. So typically I am using the Verdict, but I know a lot of people love to bring the Senator for like just a little bit more punch against those medium pen enemies. Grenade pistol, I will put in my top A+, just because I love bringing it for dealing with like groups of devastators, especially now that the ammo economy is in a much better spot. I use it a lot more, especially with the grenade, spy backpack. You can really just spam it. You get 4 grenades back on the grenade, on the resupply, and you know you can kill a lot of things. It's a grenade launcher, but in your pocket, and it's very useful for taking out fabricators. So in builds that, you know, if you're bringing a support weapon that can't deal with a fabricator, you can bring this. Opening your caches, you know, it's just the utility is so high while also killing a lot of stuff. I almost want to put it in a S+ or S- territory, but I'm just going to stop myself from doing that just because it still doesn't have like a ton of ammunition. It's just in a better spot. Starting off with a throwing knife. Throwing knives, not great, but you already knew that. You can technically utilize them if you are an absolute Call of Duty, you know, throwing knife across the map, trick shot god, and snipe devastator eyes. And like I've done it a couple times, it's very rewarding, but I would rather have, you know, my better grenades in those situations. Thermite is like a solid B. There is a point to it. You can kill Hulks with it. You can disable a Factory Strider's turret with it if you want to get that close. You can kill laser turrets with it, but it's not very effective versus the vast majority of enemies. And I feel like at the moment, there's just so many devastators. There's so many rocket scout striders that you know, having a grenade that like I need to use 2 to kill a Hulk, or like, you know, get really close to my target to be able to utilize against these enemies that I don't want to get close to. I would rather have more space that is given through like stun or like impact that is more of like an AoE alternative, because the impact is also very good against a lot of targets I just mentioned. Incendiary is very much like a low B. There is a purpose to it, you know, throwing it at the feet of a bunch of enemies, and like the burn damage will be persistent for a small amount of time, and it can kill, but it's not a great option for the bot front just because fire damage typically doesn't really do all that much, and the explosion of the incendiary doesn't help you that much either. Smoke, in general, I don't recommend the smoke grenade. It doesn't have nearly enough of a plume at the moment. It needs much larger radius for me to recommend it. It's okay for like certain one-off objectives, or like in an absolute panic, you throw it at your feet and maybe stop a couple of enemies shooting at you. I can see that point, but like you're better off just throwing a grenade to kill the thing, or throwing a stun grenade to, you know, stop them in general at shooting at you, and makes it easier for you to shoot them. Impact Incendiary is like a B+. It's not particularly useful in all situations. It's very similar to the Incendiary, where like at least it's more immediate, but it suffers from the same thing where it's just Incendiary is not very good, incendiary damage that is, and the actual impact damage itself is not really killing a lot of things in one go. For that, you would most likely go for the impact. Frag Grenade, another one where I wouldn't really recommend it, although it has slightly more damage and it has a larger radius. You're just better off throwing an impact grenade or the regular explosive grenade, because it doesn't quite hit the breakpoint of like one-shotting a lot of things unless it lands very close to those targets. Like, so it's going to like eliminate the legs of them essentially. The high explosive, I'm going to put in like A-. It's a fairly good option if you're someone who's fairly good at like placing the nade under enemies or in the middle of patrols or like large groups of devastators. You can kill quite a few with it. But that being said, I would rather use the impact. I think the impact is still an S tier grenade. If you're not someone who particularly likes stun grenades, which I do think are still the king of the grenade, the impact is a good alternative to, you know, the stun grenade, because it will outright kill things rather than just, you know, stun them and then you have to do the work of shooting at things. But stun grenade just has so much utility in the sense that it can stop a marauding Hulk on you, and you can just, you know, double tap that eye so much easier. Berserkers, it's really good against, because once you stun a Berserker, then you can finally get a really good shot on the eye and kill them a lot faster than normal. Devastators in general, being able to stun them, get a really good shot on heavy Devastators, it's just really strong. Obviously, the impact has the ability to kill, you know, a tank or a Factory Strider and stuff like that, but in most situations, I feel like I'm going to want to bring the stun grenade. All right, going through the tier list real quick, are there any things that I'd like to change? I don't think anything else really deserves to be into the S tier. Maybe bringing this counter sniper up into the S tier would be a fairly good option. I just feel like its overall damage is still quite low. So I have trouble wanting to put the counter sniper any higher than A+. The Plasma Punisher is a fairly good option, but it is struggling at times versus the new Rocket Scout Strider. So I can't really put it any higher. Is there anything else I'd want to change? I feel like I'm pretty happy with where things are. Just a quick disclaimer once again, you know, depending on your usage and depending on how accurate you are, depending on the input method you're using, and a lot of factors, you may or may not want to put something higher or lower. Just keep in mind that I'm trying to see the potential of these weapons in optimal circumstances, assuming that you can put them into those optimal circumstances. If you feel like you can't, you know, be accurate enough with the sickle to make it an A tier weapon, it might not be an A tier weapon for you. Maybe the sickle is more of a B tier weapon because you have trouble, you know, landing those very precise shots necessary to kill those devastators, right? And you have an easier time doing that with the counter sniper, for instance, right? Or maybe in general, you have trouble with precision shooting. So maybe like the less precise weapons like a Dominator or a Punisher or the Plasma Punisher or the Scorcher are more your style because you can kind of just aim in the general direction. Because of the explosive damage, it kind of guarantees you a lot of damage that you don't have to be accurate with, right? So keep that in mind when looking at the tier list. I hope you guys enjoyed. Do consider letting me know down below, what weapons are you using? How did I do on this tier list? Do you think it's pretty accurate? Do you think it needs some work? You know, where would you guys place things? And also consider dropping by the stream to let me know. We always have discussions on these kind of things. Before doing these, I consult chat and see what they're thinking and what they want me to test. So consider dropping by. I stream basically every morning, minus Mondays, NA EU mornings. So come on, drop by. We're sprinkling in some variety here and there. Also, we've been enjoying Delta Force, Hawk Ops. We're going to be playing Black Myth Wukong very soon, and Space Marines 2. We are so excited. So do expect some Space Marines 2 content on the channel in the upcoming month. We're very close to being able to play it. Very excited. So consider dropping a like on the video if you enjoyed it. Consider sharing it if you want to, you know, see what your friends are thinking on this as well. I would love to know what people are thinking. Consider dropping by the Discord as well. It's linked down below. And much love, YouTube. Have a great day.